Before Christmas 2024, I was asked to make a box as a gift. The recipient of the box is a sufferer of macular degeneration. This condition leaves people with a distinct blind spot right in the centre of their vision, as demonstrated here. This particular lady has it in both eyes, and it is significantly developed. However, she loves wood and has a fondness for traditional joinery, so the commission for this box had a specific set of requirements. What follows is the story of this box and how I met those requirements, despite at several times being out of my comfort zone. I should point out here that neither the commissioner, we'll call her Ms. B, nor the final recipient of this box, Mrs. M, wanted to be filmed or otherwise identified, but are both happy for me to make this video. Unlike most projects, the appearance of the wood was secondary to the tactile impression the box needed to give. In other words, texture was more important than appearance or grain. For this reason, I had to restrain myself from my usual MO of using a library of contrasting woods. So we settled on plain cherry. Just cherry. Though it pains me to say it, there is no walnut in this box. Just cherry. As Mrs. M can still see to a degree, I did allow myself a certain amount of visual bias and aimed for a continuous grain wrap and book-matched seam on the top. In discussions prior to the start of the project, we agreed that the box should be dovetailed, but that we needed a texture on those dovetails. This is something which I will return to later, but just wanted to drop in that I should have thought about this in more detail at this point. The brief also required that the lid needed to be shaped in some way, domed or stepped, and the box needed something else which would add another texture to be left to my own discretion. Leaving things to my discretion is usually a bit of a risk, as this is where I go to timber yards and come home with something pretty but utterly unpractical. This brief was rigid, texture over visual appearance. I had some anxious nights trying to work out how I could make the extra element until I remembered my guitar neck support. This had an element of etching, in inverted commas, as it was really just me scrawling with the pointy end of a rotary multi-tool, and I wondered if this might be the answer. A resounding yes from my customer here. Good, so did she want the trailing kind of abstract design all the way round, similar to the guitar neck thingy? Well, it's okay, but what about a flower? I could feel my comfort zone inching away from me. Mrs. M loves pansies. Could it be a pansy? Comfort zone now a dot on the horizon. Yes, I said I can do a pansy. What does a pansy look like? Can I even draw one, let alone etch it with a rotary multi-tool? Can I convincingly pull this off? Am I panicking? Just a bit, so we'll come back to that after we've had a good period of focusing on the dovetails. In order to make these dovetails tactile, we agreed to chamfer the edges, leaving the tails in relief. I had originally considered chamfering them before gluing the box together, but decided that just in case of mistakes, I would add the chamfer later on as part of the etching. This turned out to be a good call, because as predicted, I was not happy with the quality of the first set of dovetails and decided to remake them. Some of the dimensions needed to be adjusted, so had I pre-chamfered the tails, it would have caused a proper kerfuffle. For transparency, I didn't film the remaking. I've already shown it once, so no need to show it again. And we shall return to the dovetails and their detailing later. For now, we will get the box glued together and the base fixed in. The base is an offcut of ash I used for another box and just so happened to be the right size. To clarify again, I checked all these little things every step of the way, and yes, Ms. B was happy for me to save time and money by using an offcut rather than slice and dice a fresh piece of timber. I was able to use my new favourite toy here to create the dado for the base. This is the Veritas Mini router plane, designed for inlays and such forth, but adequate for jobs like this. And throughout this build I will push it to its limits, and wish I'd bought the next size up too. I did a lot of finagling to get the base to fit snugly, but allow a bit of room for the infamous wood movement problem. One of the issues with filming woodwork is that you film hours of footage but only really show seconds. Let's face it, most of these processes are repetitive and no one really has enough minutes in their lives for that, so we edit it out. So here you are really only getting a part of the process to fill in time till the exciting bits. Some time later, after a bit of chamfering and a bit of sanding, I flattened the inside of the tails, mostly to help the tails to seat and reduce the possibility of internal gappage, but also leaving the pins a little bit proud. I didn't consider this to be important as I was gluing the box together, but I will come back to it later. Anyway, I was now in a position to be able to smear glue on available surfaces and wrap the box in a layer of clamps. And while the glue was drying, I returned to my earlier artistic panic, and taking the abandoned pinboard from earlier, practiced sketching things and outlining them with a very sharp bit of metal rotating at a squillion miles an hour. I will say that if not an expert, within a few days I was at least competent. But back to the build. The first job was to decapitate the box. Ordinarily I would glue in the top panel first, as A, this adds some stability as you are removing the top, and B, it's just generally how it's done. But in this case, the top is part inset, part onset, and I wanted to be able to mark for the rabbet accurately. So I decided that if I waited and delidded the top section before gluing the panel in, then I would have open access to mark the exact size the rebate needed to be, thus eliminating any margin of error caused by being me. But it also meant that I could add in a chamfer before I glued it together, leaving a shapely groove on the joint, add an extra layer of texture, and allow me to clean up any glue squeeze out before the glue had dried. I wanted the top to sit high rather than be fully inset, as I didn't want to shape the top straight from the outside pin of a set of dovetails, which potentially could leave me open to too many woodworking hazards. Now, I don't think I'm alone here, but I do tend to over-engineer things. Whether this is some masochistic tendency, or pretending that I'm more skilled than I think I am, or even the belief that people, customers, want things to be more elaborate than a royal wedding, I don't really know. You may remember that earlier I said the lid should be domed or stepped, with the emphasis on the word or. Well, I kind of decided to do both, opting for a lovely sarcophagus step with a beautiful double layer of pillowing. I can't remember how long it took, but I had definitely aged a bit and blunted several tools to get the look I, though not necessarily the customer, had in mind. I also wondered, due to it being a single panel artwork rather than the floral band idea, whether the carving should go on the top instead of the front of the box. So I checked in with Miss B, who thought the top was lovely but preferred the idea of the carving on the front. Decision made, I was left to carry on, refining the top to a smooth, finger-friendly finish. To make the box less fiddly, and as it wasn't for jewellery, we had agreed that there would be no clasp or lock. But to make sure the lid shut firmly, and possibly to hide any gappy joinery, I felt we needed some internal panels. So, fighting my natural urges to defy the contract and add in some walnut, I repeated the mantra "stick to the brief" until I had 4 panels cut from cherry, mitered and ready for later gluing in place. Purely for the purposes of necessity, and in no way a means of procrastination, I took the chance to recess the mortises for the hinges as well. I had suggested using my homemade hinges on this box, but Ms. B needed it before Christmas, and as the hinges are time consuming to make, I found some neat and good quality brass hinges just so that I could meet the deadline. While I'm fettling around with those, may I just say a huge thank you to everyone still watching at this point, and to anyone who is a subscriber or who has commented on any of the previous videos. I'd really love to take this channel further, and I have some great ideas for the next few months, but I can't do it without you. So I'd appreciate any new comments, likes, shares and subscribers if you're feeling kind. And if you're feeling generous, perhaps you'd like to buy me a coffee. No pressure, but the link is in the description. Thank you. These bits of the build, hinges, panels, little roundovers like those I'm doing here to take the sharp edges away and allow the lid to open, can sometimes feel like they're not the most engaging. But in wanting to tell a story, I suppose they are descriptions rather than fast-paced action. And for me as a maker, there is a feeling that this is where the attention to detail kicks in, although I can use finicky stuff like this as an excuse not to do the nail-biting, tooth-grinding, sweaty panic type of stuff, which is, of course, the fast-paced action stuff. But I do promise we're getting there. Procrastination over, it's time to tackle the pansy. I used my earlier practice piece as a vague template for dimensions, scale and layout etc. But if I'd have known then what I know now, I would have printed a vector image and transferred it to the box with carbon paper rather than freehanding it. But I was reasonably pleased with the result and thankful for my earlier practice runs. Since this is the most arty-farty bit of the build, I'll leave you to critique my work for a bit without drivelling all over the top of it. I always think it's a good idea to try something you've not really tried before on something someone is paying you for, and with a deadline. It adds a frisson of pressure that clearly everyone needs in their lives. But the nervous twitch is nearly gone now, and the end result was something I am, though I do say so myself, really proud of. I achieved something resembling a flower, didn't go too far over the lines, and left a carving that Mrs. M can examine closely with her fingers and hopefully find all the layers of detail. As I got to work cutting the chamfers, it dawned on me that hindsight, as the saying goes, is a complete If you remember when I was gluing the box together, I flattened the backs of the tails, leaving the tails and pins proud. Had I left them, I could have done some detail shaping like this and they would have still been tactile and probably saved me a day's work. Instead, as the pop-up screen shows, I cut off the sticky out bits and planed the box smooth. So I am now fully committed to chamfering the edges of each individual joint. Face, this is palm. Palm, this is face. Allow me to introduce you. The rotary multi-tool proved to be too imprecise, so I knuckled down with more music, some freshly honed chisels and finally some teeny tiny bits of sandpaper. Although this was a complete ball ache, it did give me time to reflect. On the quality of my dovetails for a start. Not the worst, but I have cut neater joinery. According to Ms. B, I was being incredibly pedantic. But this led me to wonder whether something that I think is a case of could do better is really that noticeable to someone else. Is perfectionism mixed with self-doubt built into the maker's psyche. Something which can make us bin a workpiece for a teeny tiny mistake that no one would notice unless it had a neon arrow pointing at it. Surely, if the customer is happy, then the maker should be happy. I'd be interested to know what you think. Let me know in the comments if you think perfectionism is baked into being a maker and whether that's a good thing or not. With the deadline only a few days away, I was ready to assemble. So, after a final sand and a pre-finished coat on the internal panels, just to make things easier, I added a layer of sticky-backed flock paper to the base, partly for protection, but partly also to add another texture to the mix. Gluing in the panels, I took extra care to remove any squeeze out as I went. This was easier as I had pre-finished them. Still, I didn't want to present a box that felt lovely all over apart from the blob of glue next to the hinge on the right. Also, to prove that I tried to recycle, I found yet another use for the replaced panel stroke practice board from earlier as a clamp. Finally, I finished the box with several coats of Danish oil. Danish oil is a perfect finish for a tactile project. It leaves a silky smooth finger feel, it is very durable, and it will keep the box in tip-top condition despite being repeatedly handled. To me, was the only choice to finish this box. And this project has been a great way to finish 2024. Not only have I learnt a few things on the way, new skills, patience, and even the importance of sticking to a brief, but also a sense of humility. This box wasn't about my ideal grain direction or the wood species. It wasn't even about pushing the boundaries of design. Above all, it wasn't about me. It was about realising how often we take simple things for granted, and how, when you are forced to think about someone else's experience of the world, you truly appreciate what you have, and what it means to give someone a means of experiencing the world in a different way. And yes, despite my pedantic examination of micro details, once the hinges were fastened in, and there was a final satisfying click as the lid closed, I was happy with the box. I'm pleased to announce that the box made it in time for Christmas, and Mrs. M was absolutely delighted with it. I hope you agree. Thanks for watching.